through, I don't know how, the tears that were in my eyes, thinking, how could he end the relationship? What did I do? What did I do? Knowing that this was probably a good thing. But at the time, again, I was brainwashed. And so I got home, told my mom what happened, and she just began to praise God and said, this is what I was hoping for. This is what I was hoping for. And so after that, I drove back to Orlando, and I had to physically get the pieces of my life back together again. My roommate at the time, Erin, I'll never forget her. Erin was so happy that the relationship was over because, again, she was there to witness the dorm phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, because he wouldn't call me just to see if I was there. He would call at ungodly hours to make sure I was still in my dorm room. So she knew what I was going through. And I remember coming back, and she had put all of these signs around the room, little pieces of paper that said, Chrain is beautiful, Chrain is smart, Chrain is going to be a teacher one day, Chrain is going to make a difference. And she tried to help me build my self-esteem back up. She tried to help me build my self-confidence back again, because she knew how broken I was and how I would blame myself that this was happening to me, even though it wasn't my fault. And she allowed me to grow through that process. And I thank God to this day for her, because she played a really, really big part in me getting my life back together. At that time, I ended up joining an organization right here on campus called Women's Prayer Band. And that's what helped me literally get everything back to my normal self. I was able to go to a restaurant. I literally would go to McDonald's and automatically think, what am I ordering for him? When I got my first paycheck, I was like, oh wow, I can buy something for myself. I had to reprogram myself to care about me and to love me. And so since that day, I had completely stopped talking to him, stopped texting, stopped calling. Every time I would go home, my family was there to make sure that I wouldn't go see him. They would make sure that I wouldn't sneak off to see him. I had to rebuild those relationships with my family again, and to make sure they understood that where I was is not something they understood, because they had never dealt with something like that. I was probably the first person in my family to really deal with that was in my age, my cousins, my generation. And so we finally built everything back together, and that was one of the best times of my life, being able to grow and see past the pain and the hurt. If I had to give any advice to you tonight, as a person that is a victim of it, you can walk away, especially now. When I dealt with this was back in 2000, 2001. That's when I dealt with this. So there's a lot more resources now than, of course, there was that many years ago. You are not alone. You are not the only person dealing with it. You are not the only person. I remember thinking, I'm smarter than this. I've been taught better than this. I grew up in the most amazing family. But it just goes to show that domestic violence doesn't have a race, it doesn't have a face, it doesn't have a color, it doesn't have a gender, it doesn't have an ethnicity, it doesn't have any of that. But what you can do is talk to someone and make the decision to leave. You can get away. You can be a survivor. And you can be like me many years later, still telling the story of what I went through. I wrote a book. It has yet to be published, and it's called The Eye of the Hurricane, talking about getting through something like that, and how when you decide to get away, when you decide to leave, that you are able to rebuild and you can move on. You don't have to be a victim. You can be a survivor. And if you are a friend, just like this young lady said, do not be quiet. My cousin gave up on me. She said, well, if you don't want any help, I'm not going to try to help you anymore. She gave up on me. I don't blame her, not for a second. But looking back now, what we could have done different is not give up on someone who you feel like won't listen to you, who might be ignoring your calls, who might be ignoring your text messages because they keep saying you're not listening to them. Do not give up on them. Stay in there with them, check on them, and be by their side until they are delivered from that relationship, until they become a survivor of it and not a victim. That is my advice to you, and I hope that something I've said tonight has blessed you in some way, shape, or form. Thank you.